Welcome to the Love, Purpose, Connection podcast. I am your host, Estelle Bingham, and together we'll be delving into the profound meaning of love, the driving force of purpose, and the beauty of connection that shapes the fabric of our lives. In each episode, I sit down with some of the most inspiring individuals out there to understand the ways love has touched them. Nancy Levin is a master life coach, podcast host, and best-selling author. Her latest book is called Embrace Your Shadow and Find Your Light, which embarks on a transformative inner work journey. She's also the founder of Levin Life Coach Academy, where she's coached thousands of people to live life on their own terms by making themselves a priority and setting boundaries that stick. Welcoming you, Nancy Levin, to the Love, Purpose, Connection podcast. And I'm super excited to have you here because we are going to talk all things bringing your shadow into the light, which is really what your book's all about. And it's what your work is. And I'm so excited to bring this to the audience, the Love, Purpose, Connection audience. So tell me a little bit about where it started, your exploration of the shadow, because I know that you work with Debbie Ford, who's obviously an incredible sort of, real educator and sort of shining light in this field. Carl Jung, she kind of took some of that Jungian philosophy and reimagined that for a modern audience. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, thank you. So I was the event director at Hay House for 12 years. And I always say I had a front row seat and a backstage pass to all of the speakers and the teachers in the field of personal empowerment, self-help, wellness. And I was quite fortunate to be very close with Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer. And it wasn't until I was in my own crisis that I started letting the teachings of the teachers in. And my own personal crisis came in the form of blowing up my marriage. And this was 17 years ago. And in that moment, I was really clear that I had a choice. I could stay asleep, so to speak, and I could continue with projecting this image and persona of perfection to the world and hiding the truth of who I was and creating a very carefully crafted lens to be seen through so that I could manage the perception of others. Or I could really get about the business of admitting to myself what I knew to be true and making a major change. And so Debbie Ford, as you mentioned, was incredibly instrumental in my own personal process. I was working with her at Hay House. She became a close friend, and she was one of the first people who I really shared my truth with and let her really know what was going on sort of under the hood and behind closed doors. And once I did that, she said to me on a weekend that I was producing an event for her, she said to me, "You are going to sit your ass in the chair and do the work this weekend and let your staff run the event." And so that was just about 15 years ago, a little over 15 years ago. And that was the definitive moment of change in my life, the before after moment, if you will. And so I did her weekend, her shadow process weekend workshop, and really began telling myself the truth for the very first time. And from there, I hired one of her coaches to support me through my divorce. And then I decided to enroll in her training and certification program for life coaches. I had my dream job. I never in a million years thought I would leave my position at Hay House. But on the other side of that training and certification program, I really found that I felt incredibly called to help other people get free. I was unrecognizable from the woman I was when I entered that program. And so I created a I created a foundation for myself where I actually self-published my first 2 books while I was still working at Hay House. And then a few years later, ended up leaving my position there to go out full-time coaching and ultimately training other coaches and certifying them. Once Debbie had passed, there was a real gap. And when Debbie passed, she passed the torch to me. And, as you mentioned, she was brilliant at sort of translating the Jungian principles around the shadow, translating them for a modern audience, for a mass audience. And so, of all of the teachers and teachings I had access to in my years at Hay House, it was Debbie and her shadow work that really created for me the catalyst to the opportunity to step into the life I'm living now.
That's just a wonderful story. And thank you so much for that. Really amazing, Nancy, to hear about how you've kind of built into this moment of writing the books and, running your courses and all of the stuff that you do. And this idea of the shadow, because I write about the shadow and I'm going to be seeing you soon, which I'm super excited about.
Yes, I know. Yes.
And it's so sort of intrinsic and fundamental, really, for me, when it comes to a truly alchemical and effective and really a profound healing journey. The shadow is a sort of, it's just a non-negotiable. It is what I call a non-negotiable, because we have to step into this shadow space to unleash the things that we've repressed, all of the things about ourselves that we believe, all of these kind of thoughts, emotions and stories. There's all sorts in there. It's like if we imagine it, I suppose describing it to a listener, Nancy, who's never heard about the shadow before, it's like going in, isn't it? And sort of opening a kind of treasure, opening a big trunk.
Yeah.
And maybe stepping in and it's like a bottomless pit. You just kind of go in and it's like being in one of those Narnia movies, where you go in through the back door of the wardrobe, and you're in your shadow. It might not be as jolly as being in Narnia. But what for you, I've mentioned some of the things in the shadow. What else are we preparing ourselves for?
Yeah. So, I actually like to think about the shadow as being a place within me, kind of like a cave, where I am essentially placing the parts of myself I am rejecting, denying, and repressing. And these are the parts of ourselves that we don't want to be and don't think we are, as well as the parts of ourselves we would like to be and think we're not. So the first thing I want to really establish here is that we all have a shadow, every single human, and the shadow is not bad. The shadow doesn't need to be feared, because really the shadow just consists of all the parts of ourselves that we reject as we are learning how to package ourselves to be palatable and digestible to others, which is what we do, especially when we're under the age of 10. We start learning, we start receiving messages around what's okay to be and what's not okay to be, what's going to bring us praise, what's going to bring us punishment, and we start crafting this persona. And as we craft this persona, we are rejecting parts of ourselves. And so to me, the shadow really holds untapped power that is just waiting for us to harness it. And so when we go doing that shadow work, which essentially is just working with these parts of ourselves we've denied, when we do this shadow work, we are able to then reclaim and own and integrate these parts of ourselves, which ultimately returns us to our wholeness.
And I think it's so important that people recognize that there is no light without shade. Like everything,
right.
And every single person has a shadow. I think that's so important.
Yes.
And also like this idea of opening this trunk, like it is a treasure trove. Because if you were a child and you were not allowed to dance because you had a parent who, kept telling you that you were too noisy and it was too much and you weren't allowed to sing and that you actually have a singer inside you, right? That's just yearning, or just this creative, that's a metaphor, one example of the things that can get trapped and stuck in the shadow. The things that are literally cut off from ourselves, and we remove them. But, they have to go somewhere, and they go into this place.
Yeah. And when we reject a part of ourselves, we project it out onto someone else.
That's the big piece, right?
It is the big piece. And so the easiest way to discover the aspects of ourselves we've relegated to the shadow are to look at the people who we feel most triggered by. And so the people we feel most triggered by are going to hold up a mirror for us to see the parts of ourselves that we don't want to be and don't think we are. So qualities like needy, greedy, lazy, irresponsible, mean. And then we also do the same thing with the qualities that we would like to be and think we're not. We project those out onto the people who we admire and who we feel enthralled by, inspired by. So these are the qualities like brilliant, sensual, generous, vulnerable, creative, courageous. And so we get to see parts of ourselves in others.
Mm.
And when we are activated by it, either from the place of being triggered or being envious, jealous, we then get to realize, oh, this is a part of me I've disowned, and they're holding up a mirror to me so I can see it and own it and integrate it, claim it, and draw upon it to support me and serve me moving forward.
I love that. That's the sort of alchemy, isn't it? And I'm just, that's looking to what is the process and how we alchemize. And I loved the way that you had used the alchemy. You'd kind of used that as a way of describing this experience, because that's also in my book. And you talk about alchemists too, and this idea of turning base lead metal into gold, and that the shadow is we are mining for our gold, and it's that is a truth when we go into this place inside us. There's a reason why we're going in. We're not going in to have sort of just a gratuitously kind of a bad time. We're going to experience the greater breadth of who we are. Hi, it's Estelle here, and I'm so excited to share my new book with you, Manifest Your True Essence, Clear Your Blocks, Find Your Joy, Live Your Truth. This is more than just a book. It's an invitation to come home to your heart. Within its pages, you'll find the guidance to reconnect with your true essence. Through gentle meditations, heart-centered practices, and soulful wisdom, you'll learn how to release old patterns, embrace your divine spark, and manifest a life filled with love, purpose, and connection. You can order Manifest Your True Essence on Amazon or wherever books are sold, and begin the sacred journey back to your heart today. Remember, you are love, you are light, and you are infinitely powerful. Tell us a little bit about your, this kind of alchemical process.
Yeah, I mean, we have to really look at this from the place of, where are we storing away parts of ourselves? And that all of these qualities that I've been mentioning really become fertile breeding ground for the shadow beliefs that we get imprinted with and embedded with, and the shadow commitments as well, our shadow desires, the ways that we keep ourselves deprived or repressed. And so the alchemical process is really looking at how do I look at the things that I used to reject, that I used to deny myself of, that have been operating under the surface in the unconscious, because really, ultimately, shadow work is bringing the unconscious conscious in the most simple terms. So the alchemy is looking at what have I been keeping in my unconscious, and how can I now bring it forward into the light and see it for its gifts, its power, its lesson, its wisdom. And so that is the alchemy of something in the dark into the light and looking for these nuggets of gold within and not making any part of us bad or wrong. I think that's another really important piece about the shadow is we have a tendency to look at these qualities, these aspects of ourselves as either good or bad, right or wrong, positive or negative. And yet all of these qualities are charge neutral. And we put the spin on them. And so if we can relate to them as charge neutral and get out of that binary of either or and really embrace the both and, that's what serves us. And that's part of the alchemy. So it's not that I'm selfish or selfless. I'm selfish and selfless. And there's a moment in time where selfish is what is going to serve me best, even if it's something that I have been rejecting.
Absolutely. These steps that you talk about, the seven steps to wholeness,
yeah,
and part of this alchemical process. Talk us through those 7 steps. They start with awareness, right?
Yes. So we begin with awareness, which really is simply just being willing to shine a light in the shadow. So being willing to see that we all do have a shadow and that we're aware that something's happening underneath the surface. Because, science has proven that we only have access to about 5% of our brain.
Yeah.
So nearly everything that's happening within us is happening in our unconscious. So we first have to just bring in that light of awareness. And then we move into surrender. And the way I work with surrender is releasing our willful stronghold on needing anyone or anything to be any certain way. So it's not about giving in or giving up or waving the white flag or throwing in the towel. It's actually really moving us into a place of acceptance. And then in the third stage, we move into responsibility. And so responsibility is really where we step out of blaming others and being in victim mode. And we take ownership for our choices, for our actions, for the context of our own life. It's also where we start really looking at boundaries, our own limits around what we will or will not do, accept, and tolerate, and how we will hold those for ourselves. And then in the fourth stage, we move into authenticity. And the way I like to look at authenticity is really ultimately about being willing to tell myself the truth. So it has to begin there. All of my work really begins with this sort of root, this seed of truth telling. And it has to begin within. I have to tell the truth to myself before I can tell the truth to you. And so authenticity is really anchoring myself in my own truth and using my truth as that guiding force around my choices and my actions. And then we move into resilience. And to me, resilience is test driving my authenticity in the outside world. So now once I've told myself the truth, now how do I operate with others and in the world? Yeah. And then the sixth stage is nourishment. And so nourishment really has us look at our shadow desires, what we've been repressing in terms of our desires, our wants and needs. And for those of us who identify, if anyone listening identifies as a people pleaser or a peacekeeper or a conflict avoider, someone not wanting to rock the boat, or someone who has a really strong belief around the essential nature of having no needs, as I did when I was a child, my sort of shadow belief originated around the fact that when I was born, my older brother had been born severely disabled. And so when I came in, there was a strong belief system around better I have no needs because his needs are more important than mine. Better I be self-sufficient and independent. And then ultimately, he died when I was 2 and he was almost 6. And then the beliefs sort of set in around, if I am imperfect like he is, I will die. And so thus the quest for perfectionism. And so this is how these beliefs start coming in. And so as we are, as we're looking at this at the 6th stage of nourishment, we're also looking at what are the ways I've malnourished myself? What are the ways I've held myself back from my own needs and desires and wants? And then as we said, the 7th stage is wholeness. And, the goal of the soul is to be whole. And in fact, I'm a strong believer that we are born whole. We are whole. And what we do is we disown parts of ourselves. So this process of shadow work is really coming back to reclaiming these lost pieces of ourselves. And in the book, Embrace Your Shadow to Find Your Light, I talk about the metaphor of the moon, because that really is how I see shadow work. I see the process of shadow work mirroring the moon. The moon in the sky is whole at all times. And we might only see a sliver, a crescent, a half moon, a full moon. But no matter how much of the moon we see or we don't see, the moon itself is always whole in the sky. And we are the same. We are always whole. We do exactly what the moon does. We are concealing parts of ourselves and revealing parts of ourselves at different times. And so what's really essential here is to no longer feel pulled to conceal parts of ourselves out of shame or guilt, but instead to work with these pieces of ourselves to move into acceptance so that we can express all parts of ourselves at whatever time feels right. So I'm not in any way saying we want to walk around all the time overexposed, sharing all of ourselves at all times with everyone. And we still get to be discerning about when and where and with whom to share ourselves. But at least we're no longer withholding parts of ourselves, thinking that I have to hide this part of myself in order for you to love and accept me, because I've already moved into a place of love and acceptance with myself. And therefore, I'm not afraid of any external judgment. When I'm in right relationship with myself, I have no Velcro for external judgment to stick.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, those are the stages, and I want to come back to this idea of responsibility, actually. Just it's a few stages back before we get to the wholeness piece.
Yeah.
And I totally, we were born whole, and we're just returning, right? But this thing about responsibility is so important, isn't it, Nancy? I find that people can get really stuck in that place, and it's quite early on in your process, but people can get stuck not taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And then they just end up they're really in victim, often as sort of like, and the victim is really in the shadow too. So it's a lot of sort of shadow projection, victim shadow projection, all sorts of things going on in that. And it's deeply murky, isn't it? What are your processes around helping people take responsibility for their victim?
Yeah. I mean, first it is taking ownership of that part of ourselves and taking ownership around our part in whatever situation or circumstance has brought us to that particular feeling. And so this is why in this particular stage of responsibility, boundaries are so essential. Because first of all, we need to move from being other-referenced to self-referenced. Because most of us, when we are in that blame and victim mode, we have all of our attention outside of ourselves. It's very easy to point a finger at someone else. And as the saying goes, when there's one finger pointing outward, there's 3 fingers pointing back at us. And so if we're pointing a finger at someone else, we have to look at how this shows up in us and how this plays out in us. And this is why in my boundary work, I really emphasize the fact that if our boundaries are being crossed, if my boundaries are being crossed, I'm the one crossing them. And it is my responsibility to set the boundary and hold the boundary. It's no one else's responsibility to uphold, honor, or respect a boundary that I set for myself. And so I set the boundary, I hold the boundary, and I take care of myself. And that brings the attention inward instead of keeping it outward. So instead of being focused on what do they think, what do they need, what do they want, what do they feel, the invitation is to come inward to what do I think, what do I feel, what do I want, what do I need. And that's the way we can begin taking responsibility, to first turn that antenna, turn that attention inward. And for many of us, it is a new idea to put this much focus and attention on ourselves. And I hear from clients often, well, isn't that selfish? And I say yes, but I believe that selfish, self-love, and self-care are three sisters whose job it is to support us in honoring ourselves in this way. And if we feel guilty putting attention on ourselves in this way, guilt is simply an indicator that we're on the right track. We're uncomfortable with putting this kind of attention on ourselves, but it's the only way we're going to be able to take responsibility and move out of blame and victimhood into a place of empowerment.
So when we've taken these steps, and like in all of the work that we do, and we sort of encourage this, this drop into the shadow, which is really, where else have we got to go ultimately? Because it's our psyche. I mean, it just is us. It's not us. Right. It's who we are. Right. So we're just, it's a wonderful way to just, as we've been saying for the whole podcast, like just meet more parts of who you are, and these gems are in this place inside you. What for you have you noticed in your clients? What comes back to you with this? What happens with this fully alchemized life when we alchemize and we integrate in the shadow? What are the benefits?
I mean, ultimately, the benefits can range the gamut, because what we're really going to be able to do is show up more fully and be present in all areas of our life. So whether it is relationship or career or environments, wherever we show up, when we have access to these parts of ourselves that have been missing because we rejected them, as we pull them back in, we actually expand our capacity to have what it is we are truly desiring in our life. When we access the shadow, when we integrate these parts of ourselves, we are able to understand what our patterns have been. We're able to dissolve patterns of belief. We're able to recognize that the reason we don't have what we want in our life is not about discipline or willpower. It's actually about misdirected commitments that are old and from childhood. So what I see across the board, I see it in myself. First, what I notice is a return and a resourcing of energy that had been previously been used to create the armor, the shell, the mask. Once we drop that persona, who we're presenting to the world, the energy that returns is indescribable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we have that energy as fuel to move us forward towards something that is going to serve us instead of sabotage us. I have what I have coined as my transformation equation. And this is change equals vision plus choice plus action. And so if we want to make a change in our lives, we first need to have clarity of vision. And we need to be able to really envision ourselves in our ideal set of circumstances in the future, and be in the feeling of what it is like to sit in the in our vision coming to fruition.
Mm.
And then that vision becomes the gauge by which we make our choices or take our actions. Because every choice we make, every action we take is either going to serve us or sabotage us. That's it. And so we want to make sure, and this comes into the responsibility piece, we want to make sure we're taking responsibility for every choice we make and every action we take, that we do these things consciously instead of unconsciously, so that we are continuously serving our vision to bring about the change that we are most desiring.
So that first sort of rush of energy back, and it really is like that, isn't it? Because having to hold all of this stuff together, having to hold the armor and the mask, and is work, and it's so powerfully draining, that when we drop all of that and we feel safe enough to drop all of that, and all of that, and that energy just sort of rushes back in, and we can use that then to, really vision into, and our, really, for me, it's the sort of, you're kind of with your true essence then, and you're, it's the rest of your life, you get to do that thing, which is such a beautiful thing. And it's such a precious thing, this life, this incarnation that we are so lucky to be embodied it within. And also there's also that the reality that the shadow is sort of, it's also continuous work, right? Like it's always, it's not sort of done, we're not kind of that idea of, because we're perfectly imperfect, and different things will happen in our lives, whether it's you have children, or you go into a new job, or you go to a new place, you change country, or, there's different types of things will happen through. Life throws things at us. And so our shadow, all things can be activated that we didn't know were there, right?
Right.
And it's ongoing.
It is ongoing. I think back to, I sat with Debbie Ford literally on her deathbed days before she died. And she was still saying, what qualities do I need to reclaim before I go? Because this work of excavating our shadow and of owning and integrating these lost pieces of ourselves is ongoing. Because if we're human, we're going to be triggered by someone on a daily basis. Something's going to happen that's going to activate us, or we're going to see someone who we admire or we feel inspired by, and we long to expand that part of ourselves. And so the work is continuous. And I look at this as shadow work being a way of life. I don't look at it as work, so to speak, because really the work of it is allowing me to bring my wholeness forward into the world. So it's what allows me to be at my best. It's what allows me to create. It's what allows me to stand in my role as, whether it be teacher or coach or daughter or sister. It's what allows me to really return to the essence of the truth of who I am, instead of these endless versions I think I should be.
Wow. So what a rich conversation around this subject, Nancy. Thank you so much for this. I really, it's been wonderful. And before we go, so sort of like, as we're kind of bringing it in, I want to hear about your, what comes to mind when you think about the words love, purpose, and connection.
Love, purpose, and connection. It's interesting. I will always come, and maybe this is that I'm an introvert, but I will always come back to me first. And I will always come back to the place of, what does that mean inside of me? So it will mean self-love, and it will mean self-connection. And in order for me to actually inhabit my purpose in the world, I must do it from the place of self-love and self-connection first.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. Amazing.
Thank you.
So I think that everyone should read this book about the shadow. It really is. I also run a practitioner program and we do it, obviously, and shadow work is such a massive part of my work. And, and I love the way, and I love Debbie Ford, and I love, and I've loved reading this book too. And it's just,
Thank you.
It's just wonderful. So I really, appreciate all of this work, Nancy, and just, your time today on the Love, Purpose, Connection podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. What a joy.
Thank you so, so much. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for listening to Love, Purpose, Connection with me, Estelle Bingham. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd really appreciate that. And if you really liked it, then leave me a review so I can keep doing what I love, healing one heart at a time. You can also follow me, Estelle.Bingham, on Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest releases. If you feel in need of some extra guidance, then my book, Manifest Your True Essence, could be helpful. You can find it online or in any major bookshop. In the meantime, thanks again for listening, thanks again for watching, and I will join you on the next episode of the Love, Purpose, Connection podcast.